All right, so in the last video, we talked about mapping out a 5, 6, even 12-month teaching schedule. And the question is, how do you come up with that much content? Well, that's a great question. There's a lot of ways that I've done it over the years. And the way that I prefer the most would be to gather some of your youth leaders, some of your children volunteers, some of your staff, whatever it might be, a collection of all those people, and to do a 1 day, multiple day, or just even a few hours, depending on what you need, brain dump, and you just dump out everything. And so what I typically would do is look at the whole calendar, and you start with holidays. So map out the holidays, so you got Christmas, you got your Thanksgiving, you've got even things like Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day. I mean, whatever holidays you feel like are important, big days, maybe even your city, your state that are really important that you feel like are really got to lean into, and then look at church calendar stuff. So get all the church calendar stuff on there. So fall festivals, even I don't know what else, just anything that's major on your church calendar. Get all that onto those calendar dates. If you have global worship nights where everybody comes together, fasting, church fasting. I always talk to my pastor and just say, hey, I need all of the dates that you would want to have a combined youth service or shut down the youth service or any major thing that you're going after for a season that I can lean in and partner with. So I always ask my pastor about, try to give me those as far ahead of time as possible. So that way I can incorporate those in. And once you do that, you'll begin to find out that there's a lot of things that you can partner with, okay, leading up to, coming out of. So, for example, if your church, our church every year does a 21 days of fasting in January, right? So it's pretty obvious for me to do a series on fasting during that time, right? If your church always does, fasting in the middle of the year, then maybe you do a series leading up to fasting, about fasting, and then you do something in the middle of it, right? If our church, again, every November does a stewardship campaign, and it'd be great to partner with that as well. So in November, talking about stewardship, generosity, giving, all that kind of stuff. So any of those things that your church has that are some natural rhythms in your church, partner with those, lean into those. So again, you're already mapping out the year that way. Then what I'll do is a lot of times, for me, I'll typically preach through one book or two books a year. So I'll take a shorter book like the book of James or the book of Jude, something like that, that doesn't take the whole year to go through, and I'll preach through it. I've even preached through like the book of Acts, but just taken a few big chunks out of it, some of the main stories from the book of Acts, not every single verse. Some of you guys are doing every verse, or every chapter. You are doing more of that. So this should be even easier for you to map those out. For those guys that are doing topical stuff, dive into some free resources to get ideas going. Okay, so look at Free Church Media, look at Seeds, look at even Life Church or Elevation Church. Some of these churches that are providing free content. I'll even go on to paid content websites and look at their series titles and what they're looking at, and just kind of look at some of the breakdown. I don't necessarily buy the series, but I'll just look at the series, and I'll have youth leaders or interns or staff members look at those and just get ideas for what it might look like. There are some times where we'll buy the series just because it provides videos or outlines, provides just some basic content, because I've never really had anybody that was designated to creating videos, creating graphics. So I've never had anybody like that. So we've always just kind of used those and then modified them. There are seasons, there's typically a couple seasons where I'll use paid outlines. When I know we're going to hit a really, really busy time, then I'll typically try to just go ahead and buy a series that gives me a good bulk of the outline. Some of you guys are using content year round, and that's great too. But I typically have written my own stuff, but will typically do one or maybe 2 series where we do purchase the material, just because I know it's going to be a really heavy season. Like going into summer, right? We typically will do a ton of stuff in summer, our own summer camps, student discipleship programs, missions trips, all kinds of stuff. So those are like really heavy administrative times. And so I'll go ahead and lean in and just purchase some material that will help me on that side. Again, if you're using curriculum year round, that's great too. Nothing against that. But if you're writing your own content, I'd encourage you guys really think ahead, lean into those natural seasons, right? Like February is Valentine's Day, pretty natural time to do something about relationships, right? January, great time, kind of talking about goals and reaching, right? September, August, right, back to school, just lean into some of those natural things and go with it. And then again, for me, what I'd always do is I'd always leave a couple weeks throughout the year just open. And that's when I'd put in those moments where I just felt like, man, the Lord was really speaking to me about something. Well, I knew that throughout the year, there's going to be 3 or 4 weeks that were just kind of open. Those are also times where I'd bring in a guest speaker. So I'd map out guest speakers as well into there, because I always have friends say, man, I'd love to come out. And I'll say, well, hey, we've got this open date. How about that one? Right. And then again, if that doesn't work, that, I got friends that say, hey, I'm coming in town this week. Can I speak? Then you maybe just bump your series. And again, because you have some of those openings, you can adjust and flex with that. And so, I'd leave some openings. But again, look at natural holidays. Look at things in your church. What are you guys doing? What is your pastor going after this year? Different events that you're going to be doing, so when are you going to do a big outreach push, when you're going to do a big small groups push, when you're going to do a big discipleship push, right? So map out your year so it's not just the same thing all the time. Have some ups where you're really pushing outreach. Have some deeper moments where you're really pushing discipleship. Have some community time where you're really pushing small groups, right? So when you look at your overall teaching schedule, it's not sporadic. It has a flow to it, and you're covering lots of different topics all throughout the year. And it's not just the same thing over and over and over. You're actually going after some things intentionally throughout the year. And so you begin to put your events around that. So when you're going to launch small groups again, for me, I'd always take the summer off from small groups and relaunch them back in the school year for 9 months. And so again, we do some teachings leading up to that, and then boom, we're going to hit it really big and hit small groups, and then outreach, really push outreach. So again, your teaching calendar has a fuller breadth of teaching and not just what I'm feeling like right now. What is God speaking to me right now? Well, it tends to be the same thing. You tend to find that you teach on the same 3 to 4 topics over and over and over again. And it's not just about what is God speaking to you about, although that's important, but what do we want to teach an entire student's body, right? Like, what do we want to teach the whole group and not just me? So hopefully that's been helpful to you guys. I want to encourage you guys, map out a teaching schedule, look at some other free resources that are out there to get ideas, bring in leaders to help you think through those ideas.